And so this is one picture that probably you all know what it is when you see it. It's a familiar looking image. It's something that probably we all have some personal experience with, right? This is a chest X-ray that would be taken in your doctor's office, for example, or a radiologist's office. And it is a good example of biomedical engineering in that it takes a physical principle, that is, how do X-rays interact with the tissues of your body, and it uses that physics, that physical principle, to develop a picture of what's inside your body. So to look inside and see things that you couldn't see without this device. And you'll recognize some of the parts of the image. You can see the rib cage here, the bones. You can see the heart is this large, bright object down here. If you're have good eyesight from the distance that you're at, you can see the vessels leading out of the heart and into the lungs, and the lungs are these darker spaces within the rib cage.
There's sugar in a lot of foods where you don't expect it. And of course, you know, there's lots of sugar in donuts or ice cream or pastries or other things that are sweet, candy of course, but there are other places where you see it and you don't necessarily expect it. So as an example, peanut butter. Here's a list of ingredients from Skippy peanut butter, and you see that sugar is the second most common ingredient. Excuse me, you may know from reading food labels that these ingredients in any food label are listed in order of how much there is in the food itself. So sugar comes right after peanuts. Here's another example, beef stew. You wouldn't necessarily expect to find sugar in beef stew, but it's there. Now it's down the list of ingredients. It's actually toward the end. But if you look at the marketing of this and look at the can, it says there's fresh potatoes and carrots, but actually there's more sugar in this than there is carrots. And so you wouldn't eat something like beef stew and expect to find this to be the case.
So, what do we mean by well-being? Health, happiness, a sense of achievement and contentment, a state of mind and body where people can thrive. Well-being is not something that is purely limited to people who are facing extraordinary challenges in their lifestyle, health, or personal circumstances. Everybody here has a level of well-being. Music so often forms an intuitive part of our well-being management. Music to pick us up, music to calm us down, music to heal our sorrows. Our aim, through research, is to move from this level of intuitive application of music through to informed use in our communities, to take the next step in the understanding of the power of music in human life. Music already works for us on so many levels, whether it's soothing and teaching our infants, bringing people and communities together, adding spirit to our work and personal endeavors. But there is no reason to stop here.
A new study of fish called sticklebacks shows that shy individuals actually prefer to follow fish that are similarly timid. This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Karen Hopkin. This'll just take a minute. Researchers had trios of sticklebacks with known personalities play follow the leader. The fish were placed in a tank that had some plastic plants at one end and some food hidden at the other. In some of the groups, a bold fish and a shy fish acted as leaders, while another shy fish followed. And in other groups, it was a bold fish that did the following. The researchers recorded whether the follower sallied forth more frequently with the fish that was behaviorally similar or the one that was different. What they found is that shy fish were more likely to emerge from under cover when an equally wary fellow was already out there. Bold follower fish did not seem to care as much which leader they followed. Of course, no matter which fish a stickleback chose to stick with, the bold fish did lead more joint expeditions over the course of the experiment than their more retiring friends. That's because the bold fish initiated more trips, regardless of who might be tailing them. The researchers write that when offered a choice of leaders, sticklebacks prefer to follow individuals whose personality matches their own. But bolder individuals may, nevertheless, be able to impose their leadership, even among shy followers, simply through greater effort. Thanks for the minute. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Karen Hopkin.
All my research, and that I conducted with my 60-plus graduate students, was motivated by the need to learn so that we can teach. Of course, some inventions happened along the way, but I have always considered that the end result, I always considered these inventions to be byproducts of the learning process. The end product for me was always better understanding, or when one really succeeded, a unifying theory that can help us in teaching the subject. I have also looked at teaching as a vehicle to try new ideas or new ways of doing things on an intelligent group of learners. That is, as a vehicle for teaching research results. In my experience, this kind of teaching is the most stimulating and motivating to students. I have also uncovered many interesting research problems in the course of teaching a subject. It is this unity of research and teaching, their close connection, and the benefits garnered by exercising their interplay that to me characterizes the successful professor.
Today we're going to recount heroic tales of superhuman feats of strength, when in the face of disaster, some people are said to have summoned up incredible physical power to lift a car off of an accident victim, move giant rocks, or like Big John of song, single-handedly hold up a collapsing beam to let the other miners escape. Are such stories true? There are many anecdotes supporting the idea, but we're going to take a fact-based look at whether or not it truly is possible for an adrenaline-charged person to temporarily gain massive strength. In proper terminology, such a temporary boost of physical power would be called hysterical strength. The stories are almost always in the form of one person lifting a car off of another. In each of these cases, some aspect of leverage or buoyancy probably played some role in reducing the magnitude of the feat to something more believable. And even lifting many cars by several inches still leaves most of its weight supported by the suspension springs. But our purpose today is not to debunk any of these specific stories. The majority of them are anecdotal, and interestingly, not repeatable. In many cases, the person who summoned the super strength later tried it again only to find that they couldn't do it. Basically, what we have is a respectably large body of anecdotal evidence that suggests that in times of crisis, danger, or fear, some people have the ability to temporarily exercise superhuman strength.
During this time, my goals are going to be to talk about the phenomenon that we may share in part with other animals and our language, and that is emotion. And also talk about some new technology, brain imaging, functional magnetic imaging, and we try to answer some very old questions about how does motivation and emotion work. I'm going to put you with the scenario first, and some of you may be familiar with it. This was developed by Pavlov over a century ago. And in this scenario, the dog presented with the sound. The dog waits and then feeds food powder, and this happened repeatedly. Things starts to happen in the middle of the experiment there. Interesting things start to happen here. Pavlov's study was on the salivation of the dog. The salivation increases more time to paralyzes. But other things happen here too. You have a dog move around here more. All kinds of things are going on here. What we are trying to capture was the experiment going on to describe today what is going on in the brain to generate that state, which is called competitive state. But you can also think about state in terms of how the dog's feeling layer, how you are feeling about eating lunch today.
Determinant. Human behavior is affected by internal and external factors. At the end of the lecture, the speaker mentioned that psychologists are interested in explaining human behavior. Determinant is influenced by two factors, the personal factors, which are internal, and the environmental factors, which are external. The personal factors include people's belief on certain things and their individual thinking about it. while the environmental factors include temperature, air pressure, and the others thinking about them. In conclusion, one's determinant are affected by both himself and the environment. Straight salary sales compensation plans aren't very common, but they do have a place in some organizations. With this type of structure, you'd pay your salespeople a straight, albeit competitive salary, like all of your other employees and nothing else. No bonuses, no commissions, and few, if any, sales incentives. This type of compensation plan is most often used when the industry you operate within prohibits direct sales. When salespeople work as part of a small group or team and all contributions are equal, when your sales team is relatively small, or when your salespeople are expected to spend much of their time on other responsibilities other than selling. However, these plans don't tend to offer motivation to salespeople, as there are no incentives for them to work harder. Salary plus commission sales compensation plans are possibly the most common plans used today. They're structured in a way that salespeople receive a lower base salary along with commission pay that makes up the majority of the total compensation. Organizations use salary plus commission sales compensation plans when there are opportunities to support all salespeople on this structure and when there are proper metrics in place for tracking sales to ensure that the splits are fair and accurate. This type of plan is often the better choice as opposed to straight salary because it offers motivation to increased productivity and to achieve goals. It also offers more stability. Sales people will still get some type of pay even if they're in training. When sales are low during certain months or if market conditions get volatile. However, it can be more complex to administer. Commission-only sales compensation plans are exactly what they sound like. You pay your salespeople for the sales they bring in and nothing else. There is no guarantee of income. These types of plans are easier to administer than salary plus commission and provide better value for your money, paid as they are based solely on sales achieved. They also tend to attract fewer candidates, but do attract the most top-performing and hardest-working sales professionals who know they can make a good income because they know how to sell. On the other hand, though, they can create aggression within your sales team and low income security, which can lead to high turnover rate and sales rep burnout from stress.
Flipping a coin may not be the fairest way to settle disputes. About a decade ago, statistician Percy Diaconis started to wonder if the outcome of a coin flip really is just a matter of chance. He had Harvard University engineers build him a mechanical coin flipper. Diaconis, now at Stanford University, found that if a coin is launched exactly the same way, it lands exactly the same way. The randomness in a coin toss, it appears, is introduced by sloppy humans. Each human-generated flip has a different height and a different speed, and is caught at a different angle, giving different outcomes. But using high-speed cameras and equations, Diaconis and colleagues have now found that even though humans are largely unpredictable, coin flippers, there is still a bias built in. If a coin starts out heads, it ends up heads when caught more often than it does tails. NPR's David Kestenbaum reports.
I'm just going to take on where Stafford left off, and the hormone I want to talk to you about is called melatonin, and it's synthesized in the pineal gland, which is a very small, it's the size of a pea in your brain. Descartes called it the seat of the soul, and it is where melatonin is made. Is this working? And it has a rhythm as well. And in a sense, it's the opposite of cortisol. It peaks at night. We call it the darkness hormone. In every species that we've studied, melatonin occurs at night. And it's a hormone that prepares you for the things that your species does at night. So, of course, in humans, we sleep, but animals like rodents, they're awake. So it's a hormone that is related to darkness behavior.
And thanks for this opportunity to speak about Australia's engagement with Asia from the perspective of trade, and in particular to say a few words about what Austrade is doing in this space. I'm particularly pleased to be addressing trade and investment, not just, of course, because these two things are inextricably linked, but also, of course, because Austrade reports to Australia's first ever Minister for Trade and Investment. Asia's importance to Australia's economy is growing by the day. It is one of the most important factors to consider when assessing the international conditions for our national prosperity. Asian demand for our exports has helped Australia manage the global financial crisis better than most other developed economies, in fact probably better than all other developed economies. And investment from Asia has added to the productive capacity of the economy and to overall productivity. In 2013, 7 of our top 10 export markets were in Asia and represented 65% of our total exports. Asian markets and Australia's geographic proximity are critical, not just for our trade ties and our capacity to access important global supply chains, but also to the level of foreign investment in Australia. FDI has grown markedly in Australia over the past decade. In fact, it has more than doubled from about $292 billion to $630 billion in 2013.
Sometimes it's the little things that can make big things happen. Fleas and the plague, atoms and nuclear bombs, diminutive leaders in world history. Soot is one of these little things. Soot, also known as black carbon, is released when you burn dung, coal, diesel fuel, and wood. From LA to Mumbai, soot causes respiratory illnesses like lung cancer and asthma, and contributes to 1.6 million premature deaths every year, mostly among the poor. And it gets worse. Atmospheric currents carry soot thousands of miles from where it is produced to the Himalayas and the Arctic. Black carbon, being black, absorbs sunlight, so even a little soot on snow makes it melt faster. And when snow melts, global sea levels rise, threatening our freshwater, indigenous communities, and polar bears who hunt on the Arctic ice. Climate change has been a big thing for a while, and carbon dioxide has been its main cause. Scientists estimate that soot causes 25% of human-caused global warming. It's the second leading cause of Arctic warming after carbon dioxide. Let's not underestimate the impact of this tiny particle. But there's good news. Reducing black carbon may be the fastest way to slow global warming and buy time for the Arctic. Yes, even more so than changing a light bulb. And since black carbon only stays in the atmosphere for a couple of weeks, reducing it would produce results immediately. Of course, reducing soot alone won't solve global warming, but solving our soot problem now will help buy time for the Arctic and allow us to deal with the bigger problem of carbon dioxide. We have the cleaner industries, cook stoves, and diesel. Now we have to use them. In developed nations, we've significantly reduced our black carbon, but we still have much more to do. We need to tighten our standards at home and invest in cleaner technologies in developing nations. In a world going on 7 billion people, you might feel rather little yourself. But if you urge the US government and the European Union to take the lead on black carbon reduction, you can make a big difference. Go to stopsoot.org and help stop these little things from causing big trouble.
Our civilization, which subsumes most of its predecessors, is a great ship steaming at speed into the future. It travels faster, further, and more laden than any before. We may not be able to foresee every reef and hazard, but by reading her compass bearing and headway, by understanding her design, her safety record, and the abilities of her crew, we can, I think, plot a wise course between the narrows and bergs looming ahead. And I believe we must do this without delay, because there are too many shipwrecks behind us. The vessel we are now aboard is not merely the biggest of all time, it's also the only one left. The future of everything we've accomplished since our intelligence evolved will depend on the wisdom of our actions over the next few years. Like all creatures, humans have made their way in the world so far by trial and error. Unlike other creatures, we have a presence so colossal that error is a luxury we can no longer afford. The world has grown too small to forgive us any big mistakes.
Deliberate practice takes time, and people also need to find and solve problems and mistakes during it. To be a high-performing solo musician for the violin, you also have to spend several dozen hundreds of hours in solitary practice. When it comes to other things, for example, studying geometry, it is still the case. During practice, you should identify your weakness, focus on it, and carry out further deliberate practice to demonstrate how important deliberate practice is. Even for talents, they generally need to spend 10 years to achieve the high international level of recognition. So there is no need for average people to be ashamed to practice.
Morton Prince was an American physician and psychologist. His book, Dissociation of a Personality, was the bestseller at that time. It tells a story of Miss Christine Beauchamp, who was suffering from MPD, multiple personality disorder. Miss Christine Beauchamp has several types of personalities, namely B1, B2 and B3. There was hidden memory in these three personalities, with hallucination among them. Miss Beauchamp was B2. B2 knows about B1, B3 knows both B1 and B2, but B1 knows nothing about B2 or B3. The strongest personality accounts for most of the time, and it will take over the others and become the main personality at the end. This case and theory gives great help to crime investigation.
The biotech engineering has undergone 3 phases. In the first phase, people designed and made some simple machines, which aim to help people understand ourselves. And first group of people that realized we could learn from ourselves were engineers. And then, based on the studies, people began to make complicated devices in order to cure wounds, like the practice of suture, and to study physiology. This is the second phase. Later, since we went into the third phase, more complicated machines have been developed, like ECG, electrocardiography, able to have an insight of your internal body without intruding it, which can show the human brain's functions. X-ray is a good example. In an X-ray picture, you can see the bright area is the heart with some vessels around it, and the dark area is the lungs. These devices benefit humans greatly in solving health problems, such as diseases.